prosperity. Up, way, up. Like one, standing straight and strong. First and foremost, I say one. One love, one aim, one destiny. Up, positively. Up, ye mighty race. Up. Way. Melody 3.0.
Oku Honora. And I'm telling you, that is like a morning prayer. So we getting ready to link up with
powerful.
Our guests from out of Dominica. And let me ask Flavius again, what's happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, we have bright sunshine, so everything is looking good, and I noticed in the afternoon, going on to the evening, is getting much cooler these days. It has dropped a few points at least yesterday. So I think we start feeling the change of the weather as we go into the winter.
That is needed. That is needed.
Oh yes. Well, it's much more comfortable. Sleeping when in the night when you're sleeping and it's cool, it's much nicer. And I think Jamaica now are preparing their protocols for the game this evening, and it's a very important game, to say the least. But it's also the same day that Jamaica drew with Mexico in 1998 to reach that World Cup. So the people are hoping for some form of magic based on, 24 years ago to see if Jamaica can beat the U.S. because they need to beat the U.S. to keep their hopes alive.
Two factor back then. It was a Sunday evening when that happened.
Okay.
And it was also a crowded stadium when that happened.
That was like almost 40,000. Yes. And they only having 5 today.
I remember I was watching it, so I was watching it online.
Oh yes. It was magnificent, man. I mean, the whole euphoria of the people, the Prime Minister after day was in the stadium, and it was a great day to know that we qualified. Everybody was in. It was in frenzy. It was just almost chaos.
Yeah,
but today it's a different day, which we really have to put our shoulders to the wheel and do our best. That's all we can, that's all we can hope for.
You got to chant a psalm a day.
Yeah.
So you have to chant a psalm. All of the prayer people, them have to come out, come pray.
Oh yes, come out, stay in, whatever. Yeah, pray. Yeah, yeah. It should be a day of prayer. Yeah, very serious, very very serious. Because the bad part about it is that if the U.S. wins today, they have qualified.
Oh, the US
So
will be qualified. Yeah,
yes,
yeah. I
yeah,
think I
yeah.
remember that.
They can't be passed again by three other teams. So they would want to finish it off today. Although you have many, many games left, but they would want to finish it off today. But we can't afford that.
You mean US would like to finish it off today?
Yeah, they qualify today. If they beat Jamaica today, they qualify.
Oh, I see. I see.
Either they don't play another game.
That
they
not
qualify.
go happen. That will never happen. They will never live to see that happen.
That nah go happen. Them nah go beat Jamaica today.
Yeah. I think the pride alone, Jamaica pride alone, can push them forward. You know,
Okay.
can push them forward.
I see Queen Lubafu is here, so
Here, yes.
let's see if we can
our
have
flowers,
her unmute her mic
our beautiful flowers in our hair. Yeah, man.
and engage her into a conversation.
Morning, Queen.
Hey,
Top of the morning. How you doing this morning?
acknowledging well, it's raining here in Dominica. Showers of blessing.
Of course.
Well deserved
so-
rain, man. Well deserved rain. So what's happening? What's Always what's going on with the conference?
A lot is happening. We were getting our international lawyer on first, Andy Reid. We have a slew of attorneys supporting the movement of the Maroon and indigenous people. And actually, it's been an awesome time here in Dominica, where we have a gathering of indigenous people, and we've had a gathering of the Maroons virtually and face-to-face from Jamaica, from Suriname, from Trinidad, from the Garifuna Nation, and we have had the Sierra Leone representative. He would like to be on your show as soon as possible. He had to leave today. We didn't know that he was going to leave so early, or else he would have been available to share. We have our closing this afternoon of what has been an awesome life-transforming experience, where we've gone into the mountains and the valleys of Dominica. They have 365 rivers. Imagine that. And
Really?
to some of them. We've gone to the waterfall.
No, it is very strange, you know, because Antigua and Barbuda have 365 beaches.
Isn't that amazing? We are blessed
Yeah.
in the Caribbean too. We are really blessed. And
Oh,
so
yes.
I lost my age paper. I want you all to know that I was climbing up mountains and going over rocks like I'm 16, you know?
Wonderful.
And we went to the highest peak of the mountains. And what we were doing actually was reenacting the terrain that the Maroons went through to hide away from the oppression and the assault that they experienced. So there are 14 Maroon camps here in Dominica, assuming that you know who the Maroons are. But anyway, what we also looked at was the spirit of Maroonage, which is in all of us who were brought here from Africa. We all wanted to resist that suffering and that oppression. And in different parts of the world, we did it in different ways. So this space has been created here in this gathering of Maroons and academic, because we have been studying and learning the facts, not the fiction, the facts of what took place, and sharing that among ourselves and also among the world. Yesterday, I went to a group of us went to Jacko Trails. Jacko was one of the resistance leaders here in Dominica. And we were like reenacting the trails. We go through waterways and rocks and boulders and go up high mountains, you know? And so that's one of the things that we did, not just stay at the resorts and talk about what was happening, but actually go to the site where Maroons were murdered, executed, and they were beheaded, and the head was put on a stake by the beach to kind of like frighten, warn those who were part of resistance that if you dared to do that, this is what would happen to you. So we went to that sacred space. We went to several sacred spaces like that where our people had been executed, and we paid honor to the lives that had been lost. The blood that have been shed, sweat that come out. We also went to the old market where the enslaved were what should I say, auctioned off and brutalized. It was a well that we went to. It was so powerful, and everywhere we visited, it wasn't like a tourist visit. It was like a honoring and a reenactment of what our people went through. So this morning I have one of the awesome, brilliant, participants, Miss Annette, to speak about herself, and we also will have a series of participants who will give their perspective on what the experience has been like for them. So my sister is from Trinidad, and she will speak for herself.
Hello. Good afternoon, where is it from?
Yeah.
Good afternoon,
Jamaica.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Oh, Jamaica. So all over the world, wherever I'm saying good afternoon because it's afternoon here. But whatever time you are in the world, whether it's morning, afternoon, I'm saying greetings, alafia. And my experience here has been really, I'm Annette Fitzpatrick. I thought you had introduced me. I'm sorry. I'm Annette Fitzpatrick. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I lecture at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. And pretty much what I'm doing and experiencing here is to take back to my students. They are master's students. I teach research methods. So basically, this is like ethnographic research for me. But I await questions from you so that I can, rather than say things, I would respond to things as far as I can anyway.
So what I want to say about Annette, having spent a couple of days with her, is that she has given me the wider Trinidad perspective. We have learned so much about the beauty of the Trinidad Americans, and I wanted to ask her to share with us like some of the other groups that have been resisting in Trinidad. I remember as a Garifuna being invited a couple of years ago to a gathering of indigenous people, and I was amazed to learn how much indigenous people are in Trinidad, how many African resistance has been in Trinidad. I mean, we had Eric Williams, we have all these people who come from Trinidad, Stokely Carmichael. We've had a spirit and a culture of resistance. I remember also that I was taken to this Carib reserve, Unity Place, and that is where we as Garifuna and indigenous people met. So could you share with us a little bit about the indigenous experience of Trinidad? I mean, we hear about carnival and people think it's dance and go on bad, which it is. However, it has a lot of deep spiritual, a lot of historical symbolism. Please share that with us.
In my little time that I'm allotted, and I'm sure I can send you all information, but as I did say that I lecture at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, but our department handles the arts, Academy of Arts, Culture, and Public Affairs. We run a program. It's the only program in the world actually on a Master of Arts in Carnival Studies. And then everybody wants to know, well, why Carnival Studies? Because people think of Carnival as the jump up and play mass and enjoy yourself. But we teach the academic side of the carnival. The academic side, it's pretty much like when the people in the United States wanted to introduce Black studies. And they say, well, why? What is Black studies about? And it was told that Black studies is the academic side of the revolution on the ground, what Martin Luther King fought for, and Stokely Carmichael would have been Kwame Ture, the Trinidadian, but Malcolm X and these people. So the universities wanted now to look inward at this, the Black studies, the African American and African studies. Well, Carnival, I can say, our Carnival Studies department pretty much does that kind of narrative, where we've traced the carnival as coming from Africa, from Kemet, Egypt, and crossed the River Nile and went after coming down, went over to Europe, started off in Greece as they're being joined by somebody. Yes, it's okay. I'm just saying why I'm a little, yes, fine, pretty good. Yes, why it is it was first a celebration of a feast to the gods, Thanksgiving, harvest time. But by the time it got into Rome and then it became Bacchanalia, feasting, carnival on the streets. And eventually it became farewell to the fresh Carnival, where the people rebelled. They didn't want it stopped there. The Pope in Rome wanted Carnival to stop and they would not hear of it. And this is where they brought it pre-Lenten. So it was a pre-Lenten significance. And therefore it was after that, you would have a farewell to the flesh and you go into 40 days of fasting and 40 days of observation. And in fact, in Trinidad and Tobago, it was so rigidly held that you could not even sing a calypso during Lent. But before that, I should tell you, the Africans, and this is what people don't know, and this is a history that is not told, the Africans celebrated Carnival on the plantations. Well, we had sugar estates, it is said, because we were small, we didn't have big plantations, we had sugar estates. And our Carnival was celebrated by the enslaved Africans on the plantations. Now, what happened, it is called a can brûlé, the burning of the canes. And when the canes were on fire, the masters would sound the horns and come out, and the overseers would come out with the whips and mobilize the enslaved Africans to go on out the fires, to put out the cane fires. It was that was the time that they got to be out there. There was a lot of activity happening. They look forward to this burning of the canes activity that took them out there, and everybody came together and so on. Some of the canes were deliberately burnt too, because that was a form of resistance to burn down the estates. Now, when there was emancipation on the 1st of August, after we got the emancipation on August, English, by the way, the English freedom took place August 1st, 1834, and then we had to do an apprenticeship, they were saying, for 6 years. And the Africans say, ni pas 6 ans, because that was a French influence, not another 6 years. And that emancipation was reduced to 4 years. And eventually the enslaved Africans got their freedom in 1838. So that is the observation. Now, the significance, and this is where I'm bringing in this whole aspect of the carnival and the African, and people think that the French brought the carnival to the territory, because everywhere the French settled had a carnival, and it coincided with that same pre-Lenten festival. But the people don't know this, the Africans kept up the carnival, and they call it the canboulé. That was the African canboulé, so it was the African carnival. And in 1838, the Africans took over the streets because they got the freedom. So when the Spanish and the French were on the streets before celebrating the carnival, the Africans took over, and it was called Freedom Morning Come. Freedom Morning Come. Wow. And that was the start of the carnival with the Africans, and they had the masking, they had the rituals of carnival. And well, it's so much to talk about. It's very rich. And eventually, they just said it maybe took about 9 years, and the African carnival eventually, which is a canboulé, eventually merged with the French carnival, because the French carnival was more or less on lorries, where they paraded in the streets and lorries, decorated lorries, and they had their French balls and so on. The African had the masking. And what has happened, the Africans retained that opening of the morning, that juve, and it's a spiritual opening of the carnival, and it's tied back with their freedom. And they reenact that whole enslavement. So they mimic they actually mimic the planters. So they would have characters like the Dame Lorraine. Now I would tell you why we would have had the French influence when the Spanish came and they met the indigenous people and they took over. This is the Spaniards on the Christopher Columbus, Cristobal Colon. Incidentally, he was from Genoa, and people say he's Spanish, but he was not. He was Italian, but he acted on behalf of the Queen. But that's another whole other story. When Columbus came and he saw the 3 peaks in Trinidad, he called it La Trinity because he saw those 3 peaks that of course, that is the Catholic influence. But what they were looking for was El Dorado. They were looking for gold. And the king wanted to have nothing to do with Trinidad because Trinidad had no gold. It meant nothing. It was not like Venezuela. It was not like Mexico, Peru, Chile, and so on. In fact, at one stage, Venezuela governor was in charge of Trinidad because they just fell under that whole crown. In 1777, though, there was a Rumsal. He came from Grenada in 1777 Grenada is about 20 minutes by air to Tobago, and then of course Tobago, Trinidad, another 20 minutes. So he came to Trinidad from Grenada because Grenada was colonized by the French. And when he saw the state of the island, he said, well, he spoke to the Spanish people and he said, well, we can do something about this island. And they said, well, no problem. Go ahead, do your thing. If you want to improve the economy of this island first, fine. But as far as we see, there's nothing here. The king didn't want it. And then came the settler population, which meant that you can bring in your people. 3 major conditions. 1, you remain loyal to the Spanish crown. Now, you know, European had the wars, the French against the Spanish against the English. So they were fighting for territories all over. So that was one condition. The second condition is that you remain Catholic, or you are Catholic. And that wasn't difficult because they were Catholic anyway. But the third major condition, bring your enslaved population with you. And that is how enslaved. And I notice I say enslaved because we didn't come as slaves. Not many came as slaves. Some came because the Africans were also enslaving them. But that's another story. So they brought the enslaved labor with them. And this enslaved labor came from Martinique, Guadeloupe, Grenada, Saint Domingue, which is Haiti now, and Santo Domingo, and so on. So they brought those people with their people. So Trinidad at that stage had a culture of Africans and French-speaking enslaved French, and we formed a language called the Patois, which is a mix of, well, we say broken French and African. So that was a language at the time on the island, and this went on. Well, 1783 was the settler population. But guess what happened? After that, around 1787, Britain was having wars with Spain. And they decided that they're going to capture Trinidad from them, wrest Trinidad from them. And they're knowing that this was not an island with gold and all that sort of thing. So go ahead, they didn't even put up a fight. You take it and go about your business. So they were just offloading. You take it, go about your business. Not a fight over how could you take our spoils. And
so at this point, I just wanted to observe how much, you know, we could just have a whole history lesson in this program, right? So I wanted to a sister come closer. This is more conversational and sharing. Well, it's a young person, so don't go anywhere on it. And I would like her to introduce herself. Can you see?
Yes, I'm seeing.
Top of the morning, top of the afternoon.
Good morning. My name is Joanne Misikaba. I am from Suriname. I work at the government, at the Ministry of Transportation, Tourism and Communication. So in that order, I just joined the gathering, the Maroon gathering, but I'm also a Maroon, so I felt obliged to be here.
Right. Beautiful. So could you say a little bit, 'cause all we're talking about right now is about the background of the countries, what are some of the experiences, what it means to be a Maroon, how did that come about in your country? Sister Annette just spoke about Trinidad, and we are in this together.
Yes.
So please share with us a little bit. It's a conversation about Suriname, and we'll keep going on about Trinidad, because we're all one,
Yes,
you know?
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, in Suriname, we have a multi-ethnic community. We have Japanese, Chinese people, we have Maroons, we have Creoles, we have Indians, so we have different kind of ethnic groups. The Maroons are the second largest group in Suriname, the largest ethnic group in Suriname. The first ethnic group are the Indians, but we have a kind of issue when it comes to the Maroons because a lot of the Maroons live in the interior. So during the census, some of them were not counted into the population. So some people are not satisfied with the result because they think or they feel that the Maroons is the largest group in Suriname. The difficulties are not, I won't say difficulties, the challenges we have as Maroons is education. Although we see a rise up of youngsters who visit the university or taking school very serious, we do have a problem in the interior that the level or the quality of the education is not the same. And that reflects a certain point in their behavior. They couldn't cope with the changes which are developing in the community. Some leave the village, come to the city for education. But most of the time they have nobody to stay with. So they stay in a facility, but I could imagine how heavy it could be to be alone, no family around you, or no good support system. We also have a problem with health. In the interior, we have health issues, maternal health issues, but also mining of gold, where people use genocide, yes, which is the water is polluted. So we have health issues also, and all those health issues contribute also to the health of young people. They cannot use the fish, the water, it's all polluted. But now we have seen there is light. We see there's light in the tunnel when we talk about the rising of the Maroons or how they would climb up to the social ladder. We now have a vice president who himself is a Maroon. Thanks to him, we could participate in this gathering. And he fights for the unity of the Maroons. Not only the Maroons, but also the other African descents who live in Suriname. Only then we could, fight for the things we have right on. Yes, other than that, he is the leader at the Maroons, and he said something which really touched me. He said he's a vice president, but he is sharing the title, he's sharing the role with us. So he asked us to take this, how would I say this, to represent this role in everything we do.
So you are the vice president?
No, I'm not yes, I am the vice president.
If he asked you to represent
to represent the function, because it's the first time in history a Maroon is a vice president. And it means a lot. We never thought, we were working towards it. But it was like a surprise. We know it could come, but that it would be that easy, or that we would have seen it happen. I was just 30 years old. You've heard a lot. My father is a Maroon, for example. He lived in the village. My grandmother didn't even speak Dutch. She only spoke the Maroon language. I am not very, I can't speak all the Maroon languages because my father didn't teach us the language because he had difficulties in school. It was very, very difficult for him, but he made something out of his life. My father works also for the government and for the Ministry of Finance. So that also pushes us so we can see a rising of young women in the university who study law. I am a sociologist myself, but we see the rising of the Maroons.
Beautiful. So both of you have been at this gathering, and there's a lot we don't know. We'll have to have a series of conversations. So this is just an appetizer. Sister Annette, you are part of the planning and everything, and we don't know much about Trinidad. You're making it rich for us.
Yes, and this is why, you know, at this point of departure, and it was so good of you to even mention the carnival, because that was our way of resistance. That was a Maroonage, because you have the distinction between a Maroon and Maroonage. And the reason why I started from the historical perspective is because we were not considered a slave society. We were late in the thing. So, but we did have resistance. We had in the region the highest percentage of poisoning the planters. So that's how we resisted. We poisoned them, we even poisoned our own people because we just wanted to get rid of this whole thing of enslavement. So we were like second generation enslaved people. But whoever, because when the British took over, that was another bit of trauma, because we had the French culture, acculturation, and we had the Spanish laws, and then we were taken over by the British. How confused can an African population be? Because you're responding to Spanish, French too, and then the British. And the British denied us of we were only united with Tobago in 1899 when the British came, and the British, because Tobago has a kind of history with people just fighting over them. I think they changed hands 33 times. 33 times they were fighting for Tobago.
Do you also in Trinidad have different ethnic groups who, I wouldn't say discriminate, or discriminating
the class society?
As I speak, we just before we came here, the vice president opened a school. I was there at the opening of a high school for the first time in a Maroon and indigenous village. The first time. Those youngsters have to travel like 3 hours to the city just for education. And there were people had set steps to start a school there, but due to political reasons, you had a majority of certain ethnic group who didn't cope with the idea that those people also needed that level of education. So you only had a primary school, secondary school. You didn't get higher. So when those youngsters, they didn't have nobody to, they don't have anybody in the city, and you get high percentage of teenage pregnancy, or sometimes you could have crime. But people didn't understand that education, I see for myself, education is the key, the gateway for us Maroons to develop, to break through. We have our own traditions, but we need to understand what the other group, the rights or the privilege, how they think about us, so we could tackle them. But if we don't invest in education, that's why I am the vice president. He opened the school with his own funding. He promised that last year at his inauguration speech, and he made it work. So there's a chance for us, but I think that we should reflect on our behavior also as Maroons. And look, what have we done? How far has this helped us? Because if we don't reflect, we go on and go deeper in, how do you say it, in the mud?
We could talk all day. I want to ask both of you, in being in this gathering here in Dominica, what have been the highlights for you? You have been part of the planning. What do you see happening? What has happened, and how do we move forward in this
Can
experience.
I take off on that? So because of our experience, we were lucky in from the standpoint that we had a leader that came on the scene in 1956, and that's born then, but still, and he was fiercely anti-colonial, a man called Dr. Eric Eustace William, and he rejected colonialism. He said not at all, and he wanted to nationalize his people. And he went on to republicanism shortly after that in 1976. And Guyana and Eric Williams were both the folks were both, brought us to that so that we did not respond to the Queen of England anymore, and that can't take those titles. What he also did was make sure we had universal education. No one left behind. Literally, no one was left behind. So that from nursery to tertiary, education is free. Education is free. So people who didn't have access, as you said, education, people who didn't have access to that higher level of education, he thought that so this experience, as you saying, what it has told me against my background is that I now have to look and see if within my research project, excuse me, what we can truly say would have been Maroons would have been imported from the other island territories that came, because I can tell you that I have Vincentian roots, I have Barbadian roots, and when you trace that, you can trace that question of I'm sorry, that question of, because of I forgot that question now of maroon and maroonage and the carnival thing that you brought up, that we continue to resist and rebel. That is our form of resistance and rebellion every year.
As we are moving forward, you're a young person, right?
Yes.
I'm young at heart. We're young at heart. How in this gathering, what are some of the things, what has been positive and useful for us moving forward? Who are some of the other people here? And this is just an opportunity to share. I'm going to see if I get Andy while you are wrap up on that.
Okay, I would say that the nice part of this gathering is that we realize that we have a mission and that we have to do it together. But what also got me is that although we're in Suriname, we have difficulties, we have issues, we have challenges. But our brothers abroad in other islands also have,
and this is what I'm glad you said,
issues
that
and challenges.
Yes, because I never realized all of this was happening in Dominica. Dominica is right there, and Dominica would have been part of that whole French experience where some of them would have come to Trinidad with that whole question of as I said, the settler population, where they had taken the French enslaved and brought them to Trinidad to work on the plantations in Trinidad, the estates in Trinidad. So I'm glad you said that. So this is a takeaway for me here to see then, look at the depth of maroon and maroonage that is being preserved here. I mean, they've actually named their waterfalls and their spaces where the maroons went up in the hills and showed us and demonstrated to us how difficult they made it for the colonizer to catch them. And I imagine the same thing might be happening in Jamaica, because we have a representation here, not in person, about the Jamaican experience, where in Charlestown, I think it is, and Trelawney, and so on, that there are maroon communities in Jamaica. So I don't know if you all want to share with us now, what is the Jamaican experience with the maroonage and maroons? Are you there? Like we lost some signal.
No,
Lisa?
I guess.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, so could you then share with us so that we would have the conversation going both ways, to tell us a little bit about the maroon experience in Jamaica and see how we can cross-fertilize?
Well, in Jamaica, they have 5 different maroon communities. A compound and Trelawney town in the, I would say, west. And in the east, you have Scottsall, Charlestown, and Moortown. Those are closer together. And it has been like that for a very long time, the different communities. But they all work together. They have festivals every year, and you know everybody comes and all of that. I don't. If you ask me some questions, I would try and answer them.
Okay, so what this mission is and why we gathered here is to see how we can identify all the different Maroon communities throughout the diaspora and
Excellent, yes.
go forward to get recognition as a nation people. In other words, like how they've done it for the First Peoples, how they've done it for the indigenous communities and the First Peoples. So we want to have that same recognition and to be able to sit at the table internationally, and when there are international laws that we are protected, that our rights are preserved, you know, so that people will stand up and take notice when, hello, this is a peoples, and it's a peoples that have had a struggle, resisting, being, and as our sister from Suriname said, that they're still feeling the disadvantages, the vestiges of that colonial past. I'm not too sure if your community in Jamaica suffers from the same legacy of happening.
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
Yes, can you tell us?
I think this conference is a brilliant idea.
Thank you so much.
And I think you probably should follow it up with put together a working group from the different communities in the different islands and get something solid going. Because definitely, if all Maroons come together, it will be much more forceful than each community doing things by themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that is the way because my experience is that Maroons have a lot of people, knowledgeable people, both in Maroonage and in the other side also. And put all the elements together, all the knowledge that is available, and create one massive community. In fact, I must tell you, the past chief of Charlestown, Colonel Frank Lumsden, he died a few years ago, but his whole being and thinking was to create a borderless indigenous community. That's what he stood for, and he worked very hard at it. And I hope, like this conference, and you move from here, that will be achieved, because that is what is required.
Indeed.
We have to realize that Maroon are one people.
Indeed.
They came from the same beginning.
Next year with this proposal. So this is what we're doing at the moment. To go off to the and very timely. And the attorney who is leading us with the international aspect of it, he's just entered the room, and I think you would be answered, the right questions that you're talking about. Because like I said, that the Trinidad experience is one where we now have to link up with the Maroons. Right now we have what is called Americans, which again, because we are an immigrant society. That's what we are. Trinidad is an immigrant society.
Yes.
You now have to go on to find out who within the context would satisfy Maroon and who would satisfy Maroonage. And I did tell you, which continues to be Maroonage, because we resist to do it. Every year, annually, on the 1st of August, we celebrate Emancipation Day. That is a huge form of resistance.
Yes.
We had we're the first country to have made and declared the 1st of August a public holiday, Emancipation Day. So I would take my leave now and hand you back over to Mr. Cynthia Ellis.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
so
you
it's
very
been wonderful. The pleasure of inviting Andy Reid, who is our international human rights attorney supporting the Garifuna Nation. Andy, we've been talking about the gathering and the opportunity to strengthen and encourage Maroon people here. And we'd just like to give you a chance to share your part in supporting us in this journey and what our intention is moving forward as Maroon and Indigenous people here in the Caribbean and in the world.
Yes, and those are very big issues and very broad issues. And I'm speaking as a lawyer with some expertise on international law and the rights of indigenous peoples, human rights law, and crimes against humanity.
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Andrew Reed, and I teach at the University of Denver Law School, Stern College of Law in the United States. I'm also sponsored by the Vednanda Center on International and Comparative Law. And I'm a practicing attorney, been some 40 years, 4 decades of experience working with Native peoples, mostly in the United States, but within the last 20 years, expanding that out, where I'm no longer doing what we call federal Indian law, which I call federal colonial Indian law, into the international arena, the human rights arena, where I'm able to help Native nations and Native peoples to assert their human rights, including the right to sovereignty, the right to land, the right to their natural resources, control them, the right to what we call free, prior, and informed consent, which means that the dominant government or dominant powers cannot take their lands or their natural resources, including their water and oil and so forth, without their consent, which is a big issue, as we all know, particularly in Central America, as well as in South America. And those are my areas. And over the last few years, I've been approached by both, first the Maroons, who are interested in trying to establish their indigeneity. That's a difficult word for me, even though I practice in that. And they want to establish that they're indigenous peoples, right? And I prefer the word native, that they're First Nations, First Peoples, and their indigeneity comes actually from Africa. It does not come for the Maroons. They're claiming their Africanness. And so in order to do that, to be an indigenous African, then you go back to the kingdoms and the original nations of Africa before the invasion from the north by the white nations of Europe, which started in around 1451 with the Papal Bull, which is a law from the Pope that authorized the invasion of Africa by the nations of Europe. And so we go all the way back there and to establish that. And the Americas are somewhat farther ahead than Africa right now on the indigenous nations asserting their rights and them being recognized. But there's a separate body of law, human rights law, as well as domestic law developing within Africa as a whole, and then within each nation in Africa, which I call successor colonial nations in Africa, regarding the treatment of the First Peoples and the First Nations that are there. Now, in order to have rights under international law, you don't have to have been a First Nation, or even a nation. Now, you have to have been a peoples with the S. You have to existed as a group, and once you are existed as an identifiable group of indigenous peoples, you have rights, and one of those rights is the right of sovereignty and self-determination, which gives you the right to form a nation. So, for example, you have the African nation where Barack Obama's father came from, the Luau Nation, I believe in Kenya. And you have Igbo Nation and other places where in Africa, in Mali in areas like that had established nations that have been there for hundreds of years and governed them at the time of the invasion of Africa by the colonists and the imperial powers. And the point we have is that those nations and people existed for thousands of years. 500 years of colonial rule and colonial domination and colonial exploitation of those areas did not destroy their rights as a peoples. And as long as they continue to exist, as long as they've survived, they have rights that exist under international law. Now, the irony on this, the kind of the joke on this with the Western powers is that the Western powers created these laws, international law, to protect their own rights. and the rights between themselves. So because they engaged in wars between themselves, they wanted certain rules that would protect them from having future wars. Well, those wars created concepts such as territorial integrity, concepts such as sovereignty, which didn't really exist prior to that, and other concepts such as culture, protection of culture and language and religion, spirituality. These were all created by the Western authorities, Western powers, to protect their own interests. Well, what's happened now, starting in the late 20th century, after the Second World War, is indigenous peoples, native peoples, including from Africa, started recognizing that they qualify under these definitions of peoples and nations that were being used by the world powers, and started taking advantage of that. And so certainly since the early 1970s, when the International Indian Treaty Council and others of the indigenous peoples from North America and South America started approaching the UN saying that these are our rights too, they started getting an ear. And it took them 20, 30 years before in 2007, they were able to get the UN General Assembly, which is the Congress of the world, to adopt by large majority vote. There are a few dissenters. There were four dissenters. But anyway, they were able to adopt the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Of course, the dissenters were the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, which all had large indigenous populations that they didn't want to have rights. The advantage that we have under international law, human rights law, is that they're all based on the UN Charter. The UN Charter is essentially the world constitution, also created by non-native people, by non-indigenous people. But it's still put into the Constitution certain principles to protect the rights of each nation and peoples. One of those is that all nations and peoples of the world are equal. Think about that. All nations and peoples of the world are equal, large and small. Large and small. And they put that in there so that Germany would not have more rights than the Netherlands, which is a small country, or Luxembourg, the small countries, Andorra, Monaco, the Vatican, all tiny countries. But what happened in doing that is they created a principle. They couldn't exclude anyone without appearing to be blatantly racist or elitist, and so they didn't exclude anybody. So now those principles are available to Native people as well. Native people from Africa, Native people from the Americas, and from Oceania. And they've been going in, and that's after 30 or 40 years now, they created what's called the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, which we took a Maroon delegation to in 2019 and started to make the argument that the Maroons are indigenous people because they've retained their indigeneity survives from Africa. They brought it from home.
One of the beautiful things that's happening here is that we are bringing together academic, professional, scholarly people to listen to the voices and the cries of the indigenous Maroon people, and not limiting it to being put in a box, but really see how we can flow in connection with each other. So that's the triumph of being here in Dominica. And as we've gone on the field trips, laboring through the mountains, the boulders, the pebbles, the streams, the waterfalls, it has been like a reenactment of the journey that our people must have gone through. I mean, in the case of the Garifuna, in a few days, the 19th of November is the celebration of Garifuna people in Belize. And we have different dates for different countries for the Garifuna Nation. And what was very powerful and stirring for me in this gathering is the Rastafarians and the Maroon descendants or ascendants were very touched and moved when I shared that, to the point of tears, because on the 19th of November in the 70s, here in Dominica, a Dread Act was passed, which was given the right to incarcerate, arrest, execute anyone who was wearing locks without no question. So if you were wearing locks and you were in somebody's home, they had the right to come and kill you or take you out. It was a very serious law. So when I shared that from the Garifuna Nation, it really moved our brothers and sisters, because it was like a shifting of the narrative from oppression and destruction and trauma and suffering to celebration. So they want to share something about that this afternoon as we are closing. And that's why attorneys like Andy Reid are so important to us. We have another attorney, Tiani, who is from Dominica, and he made a pledge at the outset, as Andy has done. He said, I'm available to you all any time. Sound like you, Flavius. Call me any time of the day or night, because of being so committed and dedicated. What Tiani, this attorney, said, he's the son of one of the prime ministers of Dominica, Rosie Douglas. He said, I make the pledge to the Garifuna people. He said, I was so enraged when I heard about the building of a gas station in St. Bite next to Garifuna Sacred Temple. And so as a result, we attorneys are going to develop a network. So part of the conversation on the gathering is to have attorneys who are available to support, advise us in the navigation of these colonial legal structures. So I really want to thank you. I didn't want us to miss that part, because the Rasta people and the like-minded people in this gathering have really kept coming to me and wanting it to be shared that they went through that kind of oppression here through the laws. And some of them were incarcerated for 66 days. They could be held in jail for 9 months for having refused to put on locks. So Flavors, I'd like you all to interview some of these brothers who went through this journey and stayed in prison and did not eat or drink water. They refused to eat the food. The story is phenomenal. So part of being here in Dominica is really appreciating the stories of the people and the capacity of the people to overcome. So I just wanted to, go ahead, Ade. I just wanted to really
Shuluhali Wadani, our time has come.
It's important though, because we visited the Kalinago community here in Dominica, and they are a First Nation, First Peoples here, and the African people arrived afterwards. And it's the same in Belize. The Mayan people were there, and before the Garifuna arrived from St. Vincent, but they are neighbors. And one thing the colonial powers do, they try to divide people by pitting them against each other. And they do this at the international level as well. I see that as an international lawyer working with both communities. So it's important that the alliances, that we look beyond that. We look at how colonization and racism manifest. And we recognize the dynamics of that. And we refuse to become pawns to those that benefit from racism, that those that benefit from colonialism, that those that benefit from imperialism. 500 years of the raping of Africa and the raping of the Americas, and moving all that wealth and power north, and then destroying the environment of the earth with it.
So I want you to know that
we have to have that alliance.
He's an honorary Garifuna. And the Surinamis, the Maroons have given us, we wear this.
So I'm very honored that way. But I'll be quiet at this point, but I just want to let you know that we are at an exciting time. It's a time of change, and it's a time of opportunity. It's a time of hope. And you don't have to be a peoples in order to exercise these rights. There's a human right to culture. There's a human right to religion. There's a human right to food, which means your food, not the food of the colonizer. And there's all these human rights that are available to people, and now it's just a matter of knowing how to take hold of them and use them to protect yourselves.
Shuluhali Wadani, our time has come. Shuluhali Wadani, our time has come. Shuluhali Wadani, our time has come.
You need to go back into the gathering.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I want to hear more about that dread law. I want to know if it has been reversed, and I want to really meet those Rastafarians as well.
Yes, definitely.
If I could get maybe tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes. If I can get them tomorrow, or any time after. Yes, I would love to, to talk with them.
was a very deep experience. People literally came and cut off the locks. People ran into mountains, so it was like a reenactment of a Maroon way of life again, you know, and they share it with a lot of passion. And the people here from Dominica say they're so thankful that we are here to give that value, that recognition, and that love for their overcoming. And the law was reversed. You need to hear the story of how that became setback. But we have the attorneys who are very dedicated and committed to supporting our people on the journey.
All right, I'm on a
Let's
panel.
do that tomorrow. Let's do that tomorrow. Yes, that would be great.
All right, have a joyful day.
Yes, so
Queen Lubafo and Andy.
Yes, you're welcome. We're always at your service to share the story of our people who are resisting. Okay?
And we are here for you as well. This is your network.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just Outlook.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Queen Lubafo. And so, Flavius, with that, we come to the end of another Real Stuff podcast. And today we had delegates from the Maroon gatherings in Dominica 2021. And we just talked to Andy, one of the attorneys representing the Maroons and indigenous people. And also my queen, Queen Lubafo Iseni, who is there as well. You know, Flavius, Queen Lubafo act as our correspondent on the ground this morning, so we have to give her a big
yes, oh yeah,
we have to
definitely
give her big ups for that this morning. So for those of you inside the chat room this morning who are watching, I hope you enjoy all that you have seen this morning, and I want you to come back tomorrow because we're gonna have another segment of this tomorrow. You know, for we call it our another presentation. So it's a continuation of Indigenous Outlook. So please remember to subscribe, like, and share the video. And the object of this channel is to educate you and entertain you. And remember that the Real Stuff podcast is your Caribbean podcast. So live and love every moment of your life and be grateful for each new day. Cherish your family and friends and bless others and keep the faith. And never lose hope. And remember, prayer changes things. Regardless of what religion you belong to, you must pray and continue to pray. So on behalf of my podcasting team this morning, I want to thank Flavius for being here with me this morning. And I want to thank all those who didn't make it, but, you know, their spirit was here with us, Francine, Max Juanette, and Courtney, along with myself. So have a joyful morning, a joyful afternoon, a joyful evening, depending on your time zone that you're in. And just, you know, make sure that whatever you're doing, do it safely. I'm going to ask Queen Lubafo. Well, we know when I say ask Queen Lubafo to say the Our Father in the Garifuna language. And Tafina will take with myself to take us out of here. So until then, take care of yourself. Queen Lubafo will take us away.
You lead us so full. You belong far away away. Ajugwala Lebabu Seru. Lida Mua, Lida Sungfula. Lida Mua, Lida Sungfula.
Well, unfortunately, this is it. Till next time. Bless.
All you gotta do is just speak. One word is enough, and I'm no longer sorrow. I forget what I was trying to say. I no longer do what I was gonna do, but you're no good for me. That's why me know I send me a fickle flea. Me I fi take away me say.
Well, unfortunately, this is it. Till next time. Bless.
Me I forget all the side.